Today I'm going to introduce you to a two-point perspective. As you learned in the one-point perspective video, the perspective tools in the toolbar, the grid tool and a selection tool. We also learned about the widget and how that works. So when I click on my perspective tool here, it automatically pulls up a two-point perspective grid. And as you know, under perspective grid, this is my two-point normal view that I'm looking at. Now, my tools work exactly the same as it does for a one point. So with my grid tool, I can change my grid to reflect any type of a viewpoint that I would like. I can adjust the size of my grid. So how this all behaves is exactly the same as one point. It's just that we have two different points to deal with that will go to the horizon line. So once you have your grid set up the way that you want it, however you choose to set it up is completely up to you. Then you can start working into creating the objects for your grid. So of course I have the perspective selection tool. I just kind of go into that after I'm done setting up my grid. But as I hit different shapes, if I hit M on my keyboard and I draw in a shape, even though I'm on this side of the grid, it still thinks I'm on the left grid. And so it's continuing this grid over onto this side. So always make sure that you have the proper grid side selected for where you want it to go. And as you position that, it pops it into place. And it's just filled with the default fill and stroke at this point. So I can again switch. The one point grid just had a left and a horizontal. So now that we have a 2-point, we also have a right grid. And you can see the keyboard shortcut for that is 3. So left grid is 1, horizontal is 2, left is 3. So if I want to move this into the third grid, I can grab it, start to move it, hit 3 on my keyboard, and now it moves it to that side instead of this side. This is filled white, that's why it's covering up that previous one. So I just send this to the back, it brings it to the front. I can draw another one here. I can make it look like this building has, I'll give a little bit more space in here. If I want to build out the side of this building, then I would go to my left grid and I would start to draw out that side of the building. Snap it into here, but then of course I want this to come to the front because I want it to be behind that building. And the great thing about this too is, you know, obviously the grid doesn't extend here, but it's still using the information on that grid. What if I wanted to make this a brick building? So I'm making sure I'm in my my right grid. Going to just draw a little shape here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit more. Start my grid down here. Option drag it to snap it. Command Y. You guys all know how I'm a fan of artwork mode to make sure that things are aligning where I want. There's no glaring gaps. So I option dragged this to make a copy of it. So we all know that Command D will repeat that transform and it keeps it going. So now I can just shorten up this one. Again, make sure that you have your perspective grid tool. And I might go into artwork mode just to make sure I'm snapping it where I want it to be. Zoom out. Going to grab each one of these, shift click this so I'm not also grabbing the building. And now I can option drag this up. Command D. And it's pretty close to where I need it to be. And I'd snap those to the top of the building. So now the problem with this brick, of course, is that I didn't offset my second row. And so when I take off my stroke on here, it looks like looks tubular instead of like a brick, right? So I'm going to put my stroke back on there, but I'm going to make it a bit of a thinner stroke. And I just keep drawing into this. So I can add doorways into here. If I want to make that a black doorway, if I want to make it a dark gray doorway, right, to kind of make it stand out. And if I want to add my like an overhead onto there. So this obviously is going on the left grid, but I want it to come off the horizontal. So I'm going to hit 2 and I'm going to build out an overhang. Make that a little bit more concrete. Slide that into snap a little bit so it's more of an overhead. If I want to build a column into here, I'm going to hit M. Here's going to be like the right side of the column that is going to go down. And then I need a left side, so now I'm going to hit 3 to create, you know, the other side of the column. And I need one over here as well, using my Smart guides to make sure that I'm aligning them. Going back to 2, oops, I meant 1 to create the other side for this one. And I want that one to go behind that one, so I'm just kind of pushing that behind. Coming back in here, and I want to snap. Right, check my artboard out to kind of make sure I'm having things aligning where I want them to align. That one's a little short, but that's okay. I don't like how, I'm not a big fan of keeping strokes on items. This one's, oops. So I definitely will take those off. I want a little more depth on this overhead, so I'm going to, that should be a 3. No, that should be a 1. I just want a little bit of an overhead. This one would be the 3. Shift V, remember, gives you the selection tool that allows you to adjust the size but stay in perspective. And then I would just add shading into this so that I don't have to keep a stroke on it, right? So if I take these and I make my stroke none, you don't have much depth. So I have to determine, well, where's my light source coming from? So my light source, right, is coming. So if I want to, if it's hitting the front here, then this one might have a little bit more black to it. So I will just come in here and I will add a little bit of black for a little bit of dimension. This one is going to have a little bit more black, even because it's even under like the shade right there, right? So a little bit darker to kind of show that's the other side. So work with your shading as well. We want it to match, but we also need to be able to see some of the differences between them, right? So adjust that shading accordingly, and maybe this one needs that gradient. Put a gradient on there, hit G for my gradient tool. I can adjust how much gray is actually on there. Pull that so it's coming in there a little bit more, adjust the size of this. Maybe I don't want it to go that angle. Maybe I want it to do that angle. Maybe I don't want it to go to white. Maybe I want it to have a little bit of black in there, right? So it's not going completely to white. So now I have an overhang. I could add a sign onto here. I could add a logo onto there. And I know that I showed you that in the 1-point perspective, so I'm not going to review that again. Really, the biggest difference is just that the grid disappears into 2 different points. So I actually have 2 different sides for my perspective. So go ahead and create a scene of your choice. It's pretty easy to kind of do like a city block. Be sure to add in like maybe sidewalks and curbs and a street as well. If you are using a city scene as your as your option. So leave a spot, do a curb on there, and it's okay if it goes off the edge of the artboard if that's what needs to happen. Come over here. Pull that out so I don't have like that empty space right there, but I'm going to maybe paint those black, take the stroke off. Maybe I don't want it to be quite that dark of a black, even if it is asphalt, right? Maybe I'm going to kind of go to a lighter gray. Don't be afraid to add some shading into there if needed. Do I want a like a center line for the middle of the road? So I'm going to use this grid, like, or this line right here as a line, and then as I pull it, do you see how it's changing, right? Okay, because obviously it's following that perspective. So even if it's not an even one, and I might grab kind of like that orangey, kind of a yellow color for the center. If you want it to be a passing or non-passing line. Okay, so definitely add the details into there. I want a background in here, and remember the background is the sky, so that would go into the no active grid. So I can come in here and just make a big rectangle. I don't want a stroke on that. Depending on the color of the sky that you want, right? Send it to the back. And of course, don't be afraid to work with layers as well, but now you can see too, like I definitely need something for that horizon line, right? And I never drew this side of my building. So when I'm building these out, like if this building, hitting the wrong numbers when I'm doing this, it's coming across. If I even hit just the default colors, then even though I'm drawing that sky further down, and I guess technically it really only needs to go to the horizon line. Add some, add a nice background scene in there. Or is there a light source? Is there a sun, right? Is it a night scene? Do we want like lamp posts with lights on them? But go in and create a scene for a 2-point perspective and have fun.